Hey guys, Joe from Electric Kicks here. Today we're putting together a video for you guys after many requests of the Monorim front suspension for the Ninebot Max. Now I'll run you through the tools that we're going to need. So we're going to need an 8mm spanner, going to need an 11mm spanner, a 14mm and a 15mm spanner. We're also going to need a range of Allen keys or hex keys. We're going to need a number 5, a number 4, a number 3 and a 2.5. Be also really handy to have just a little flat blade screwdriver to dig out some little rubber grommets, and a little set of vice grips to hold the brake cable. And if you do have, not necessary, you can use the 8mm spanner, but I like to use a deep socket, makes it easier and quicker. All right, let's jump into it. First things first, we're going to be removing the brake cable because we have to remove the wheel. So I'll come around. So this is where I was, like the little vice grips, I get to hold the cable while we undo the little 8mm lock nut. Everything off, and we need our 11mm to undo the top lock nut. Everything comes out. I like to just throw everything back on so I don't lose it. It's just my personal habit because I'm prone to losing everything. Next, I want to remove all the plastic shrouds and the mudguard and stuff because we've got to drop the wheel. So our little screwdriver to dig out these grommets. A heat gun makes peeling these stickers off. You have to get these stickers off because there's a couple of screws under there. So now we've got the little reflector sticker off. We've got 3 Allen bolts on both sides, so we have to do both sides. So just get a 3mm, pull them off. Now these just unclip, come apart. Leaves us just with a 15mm nut to get the wheel off. Oops. There we have the wheel. Brake fell off at the same time, that's fine, just goes back on. All right, so next we're going to undo the stem, remove the stem, so we can drop the front forks out. Need a little 2.5 to undo this little screw up the top of the clamp. That comes out, and the pin comes out. Once again, safest place to store it is back. Just put it back, it sits there, won't lose it, because if you lose it, then you're in trouble. Got a 5mm to undo the big bolt that goes through the stem. Take the bolt and the spacer and washer out. Put it somewhere safe. The next is these 2 5mm. So they just need to be loosened. 5mm Allens. And then if it's loose enough, it should come off. There we go. So you just need to place that safely so it doesn't drop, because it's still connected with your control wire that goes into your scooter. All right, this is almost ready to come out. We just have one more little 3mm Allen key to undo on the side. Once that comes out, the whole fork will drop out. Caught it. Don't lose them. So really critical, on top of the fork we've got a spacer and a bearing or washer. So there's two items. We need to keep both of them. I'll just pull that out and show you. Really critical to keep these, do not lose them, we need them later. A lot of people are complaining of stem wobble after they install one of these suspension kits. The main reason you get stem wobble is that they've left this out. So we want to put this back in. We want to put the original bearing back in as well, because the one that comes with the kit just isn't quite as good as the original one. So I keep them and I'll put them aside for later. Fantastic, so now we're ready to start getting the actual Monorim suspension ready to install. So I'll pull everything out of the box. Comes with two springs, a spring that's already installed in the shock and another spring. The one that's in the shock is rated for people under 75 kilos, and the one that comes outside the shock is for people over 75 kilos. As the owner of this scooter is over 75 kilos, I will be installing this, and I'll show you what you need to do, because it is also another question we get. We get a lot of noise, a lot of rattles, and that's because the spring needs to be greased. First things first is that we need to pull the top section off the suspension. So we undo the shock from there and we slide this off. Needs a 5mm Allen on each side. There we go, that comes off. That's going to go on the top later. So, first things first, as I mentioned, we're going to need to put this inside here. So it just screws off. Pulls out like that. And this spring just falls out. Put that away. Now I'm going to grab some grease. So I'm going to install this into the shock now, and as I mentioned, we're going to need to put some grease on it. Now, if you don't put grease on it, it's not the end of the world. It's still safe. It still works fine. It can just tend to rattle and make some noise, and we've had some, people talk to us about that. The way to stop that is by greasing the side of the spring, a little bit on the top and the bottom, and that will really dampen down the sounds. Throw that in. Once that's in, we put the shock back together, and it's good to go. You can get grease from any of your hardware stores. It's pretty easy if you need it. All right, so the new suspension comes with this little silver bearing spacer washer thing. This is what I was talking about earlier. I don't want to use this. I want to use the original one, the black one that came with the scooter. So what we want to do is put that on the top, like the original one, once we've got this in the scooter. So we slide this up, comes up. Then we put that original washer on, space. And then the critical one is this spacer, the original one that I pulled off earlier. This is the one that people keep leaving off by accident, and then they complain of stem wobble. So this is the critical one that goes on. Once we've got that on, then we have to put this back on. This came off originally. Now, we're going to tighten it just to hold the forks in. We will have to adjust it later But for now, we need to just tighten it so the forks don't drop out. And I can use 2 hands. There we go. So now I'm about to thread this through. This goes through this item here, spacer on that side, and then through the actual clamp. So we put the bolt through the bearing, put the spacer on the other side and feed it through so it's flush with the spacer. That's really good. And then we slide this in up to the hole and we see if we can put it through. There we go. Once that's in like that, that will now hold everything in place, and we can loosen this again so that we can slightly adjust it. Okay. All right, so once that's come through the other side, we do the same thing again. We put the spacer on so it's flush, not sticking out. Then bring up the suspension arm, the bearing, and push it through. We can then put the bolt on the other side and tighten it up. All right, next, now we can put the shock on. So we just, the bolt that we pulled out of the shock, just line that back up. Feed that through, pretty simple, and tighten it up. All right, fantastic. So now Monorim suspension's installed. I'm going to start putting everything back together. I'm going to start with the stem, just to get out of my way. So just push that down as far as it will go and make sure it's as in line with the stem as possible. We can always adjust this later. So I'm just going to start putting everything back that we took out earlier. Then we're going to tighten up. And lastly, just put the clamp back on. That's it, the stem's back together. Next, we're going to install the mudguard. I've just saved you a lot of time because what everyone does is they put everything back together, the front wheel, and they realise they left the mudguard off. The mudguard goes on now. So you've got a box of bits that came with the suspension. You are going to need the 5mm short bolt, and you'll need the little rubber grommet that comes in the pack as well. And you'll also need to use this little foam pad. So that pad goes in between the actual mudguard and the bracket. Just prevents it from getting too damaged. So now we're going to install the mudguard onto the scooter. Once that's installed, leave it loose because we'll adjust it later. Cool. All right, now it's time to put the wheel on. Make sure you line up the brake properly in the little slot. You'll see it when you go to do it. There's a little slot on the inside, came off the original one as well. So it goes up, we'll just tighten it up so it doesn't drop off. 15mm spanner again. Once the wheel's on, now we can tighten the mudguard. Make sure it's in the right spot, not touching. Fantastic. So now it's time to put the brake back. It all goes back the way it came off. Thread the cable through there, and we put the first 11mm lock nut on. 11mm spanner and just give it a tighten up. Don't over tighten this, just needs a little nip. Put our spring back on. Now just adjust the brake. Just feed it up a little bit till it's firm and keep threading it up. That'll be a good brake adjustment there. You can adjust the brakes later. And then we throw our 8mm lock nut back on. Now we're practically at the end, so all we have to do is put these plastic caps back on each side. All we need is a 2.5mm Allen. Use the little black bolts that came in the packet with the suspension. Repeat the process on the other side, and then we're just left with stickers, the reflectors. And there we are. There's our Monorim suspension kit all finished and installed. Now the next thing to do is test ride it.